What's up, buddy fighters? This is Tryhard Gaming, and for today's video, we're gonna do a deck profile for Darkness Dragon World. And the attribute for today will be Death or Deep. Now, our buddy for today is Death Ruler Gallows Revival Buddy. So, are you excited to learn more about Darkness Dragon World and its attribute Death or Deep? Just keep watching the video. And of course, to start off, we have the monsters of the deck. So, our first monster, of course, will be the Buddy. Death Ruler Gallows Revival Buddy. So the call cost of this card is put a death from your drop zone into its soul. Its first ability is called Shadow Dive. All cards on your field can attack your opponent even if they have a monster on the center. The second ability is at the start of your attack phase. For this turn, all death monster on your field gets power plus 15,000, critical plus 1, and double attack. Its third ability is called Soul Absorption Chain. When the card attack of death on your field deals damage to your opponent, you gain 2 life and draw a card. And it also has a Soul Guard. So that is our buddy, Death Ruler Gallows Revival Buddy, and has 4 copies on the deck. Our second monster, ooh, that's too high. For our second monster, it is Death Gaze Dragon Revival Buddy. The call cost of this card is pay 1 gauge and put the top card of your deck into its soul. It has an ability of counter and an act. During your attack phase, call up to 1 size 1 or less monster with both Black Dragon and Death, other than Death Gaze Dragon Revival Buddy, from your drop zone by paying its call cost. But you may only use that ability once per turn. Its second ability is called Spectral Strike. When this card attacks and destroys your opponent's monster, drop 1 of your opponent's gauge, deal 1 damage to your opponent, and your opponent chooses and drops a hand card. Death Gaze Dragon Revival Buddy has 4 copies. Our third monster will be Death Gospel Death Gaze Reaper. The call cost of this card is pay 1 gauge and put the top card of your deck into its soul. It has also a counter ability, an act. During your turn, you may pay 1 life. If you do, put up to 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck face down on their separate open areas as size 0 with 1000 power and 1000 defense and critical of 1 monsters. You may only use this ability once per turn, okay? It also has an ability called Spectral Strike. When this card attacks and destroys your opponent's monsters, drop up to 2 of your opponent's gauge and deal 2 damage to your opponent. It has double attack and Soul Guard. So Death Gaze Reaper has 4 copies on the deck. Now, our fourth monster. It is called Malicious Conqueror V Veil. Now, it has an ability called Death Rain. When this card enters the field, if another Black Dragon is on your field, put the top card of your deck into the gauge and draw a card. Then if another Death is on your field, draw another. Death Rain only activates once per turn. And it has a second ability. It has Spectral Strike also. When your opponent monster is destroyed by an attack, deal 1 damage to your opponent. So Malicious Conqueror V Veil is more of a support monster in the deck because its main purpose is to draw and then charge, and you get to draw another one if you have a death on your field. So it's more of a support monster for me. It also has 4 copies in the deck. Now, our fifth monster of course, this card is a staple for every Darkness Dragon World deck, or is it just me? But I think this is really a staple card for all Darkness Dragon Worlds. So this is Chaos Daryl Burke. Okay? So its ability, Warrior Instinct. When this card enters the field, look at 3 cards from the top of your deck. Put one from among them into your hand and put the rest into the drop zone. Warrior Instinct only activates once per turn. So why does it call staple card? Because technically it doesn't really need anything to activate the Warrior Instinct or the ability. So I think it can be used to any Darkness Dragon World deck. So yeah, that is our 5th card. That one is also an important card. So yeah. So our 5th card, it's quite a generic card. It's a generic card, but it is made for a defensive type of a monster. It's called Mediator of Prosperity and Vanities, React Empress. It is a generic card with an attribute of Tarot, okay? So its ability, Counteract. You may drop this hand card. If you do for this turn, the next time your opponent would look at the entire deck, your opponent looks at the top 4 cards of the deck instead. So imagine this card, most of the decks right now has look, search, and put to the drop from the deck, call from the deck. So this one is really an amazing counter for all those decks out there who always rely on the deck calling or looking in the deck, like Cosmo Dragoon or all those decks who can look or search or put to drop from the deck. So this is a really great counter for all those types of card. So that is the monster of Darkness Dragon World, Death or Deep. Let's head over to the item. Of course, the Darkness Dragon World, Death or Deep only has one item, and it is called the Dark Mad Knife. Its equip cost is pay 1 gauge and put the top card of your deck into its soul. This card can attack even if a black dragon is on your center. The third ability is if a monster with Spectral Strike is on your field, this card and all black dragon monster on your field cannot be destroyed or returned to hand, and their abilities cannot be nullified by your opponent's card effects. It also has a 4th ability, Spectral Strike. When your opponent monster is destroyed by an attack, deal 2 damage to your opponent. So Dark Mad Knife has 4 copies on the deck. Now this item is more of a security item, or it's a defensive item, because when you are equipped with Dark Mad Knife, literally all the monster and that card cannot be destroyed, returned, or nullified by your opponent's card effects. So yeah, literally it's a defensive item, but also an aggressive one, because this card can attack even if there is a monster in the center. And its Spectral Strike is too damaging for your opponent, because when your opponent's monster is destroyed by an attack, deal 2 damage to your opponent. That is already a -2 to your opponent once you destroyed a monster on their field. So yeah, this is really a damn good card. This one's good. So let's head over to the spells. Now, the Darkness Dragon World, Death or Deep has a lot of spells. Though it is not heavily reliant on spells, but it just has a lot for you to gain a lot. It is a mix of a support, enhance, and defensive spells. So it's quite a lot. So if you think you are having a hard time understanding each card, just pause the video somewhere and then read the card, because we will show it to you on the screen. So first spell is Noble Sacrifice. Cast cost is pay 1 gauge. It has an ability counter. Destroy a black dragon monster on your field. If you do, gain 2 life and draw a card. So Noble Sacrifice is a support card or an enhancement card, which is also a draw card and also a gain life, okay? Now, our second spell is Death Ruin Sense. Its cast cost is pay 1 gauge. Your opponent chooses and drops a hand card, then put up to 2 monster with both Black Dragon and Death with power 6000 or greater from your deck into your hand, and shuffle your deck. You may only cast Death Ruin Sense once per turn. This one's a search card. It's an enhanced card. Technically, you use this to search both Gallows and Death Dragon, Death Gaze Revival Buddy. So, because both of them are combos. Okay? Now, third one will be Removal Voice. Its cast cost is pay 1 gauge and has an ability of counter. Call a size 1 or less black dragon monster from your drop zone by paying its call cost. You may only cast Removal Voice once per turn. This is really an offensive card. Once you are short in attack or you need to push through a very defensive deck, Removal Voice is one of the best option for Darkness Dragon World, because it can call any black dragon with size 1 or less from the drop zone, literally in any part of the field. I mean, the right, center, and left. So that's the third item. Removal Voice, 1 copy in the deck. Next one, we have Curse Decline. You may cast this card without paying its cast cost if your opponent has 8 or more cards under their flag. Its cast cost is pay 2 gauge and pay 1 life. Counter, choose up to 3 cards on your opponent's field, and for this turn they get power minus 8000, defense minus 8000, and critical minus 2. So y'all may be thinking, that is a Cursed Dragon card. What's it doing in Death or Deep? Now, Curse Decline is a defensive spell and at the same time an offensive spell. Now, if your Death Dragons can't break through on your opponent's monster, you may cast this to counter it with minus 8000 defense. And if your opponent has too much power to destroy your monsters, you may cancel or you may decrease their power up to 8000. So this is both an offensive and defensive spell, and it is really good in any deck also. And the cast cost is not quite huge. It's only pay 2 gauge and pay 1 life. And looking at Death or Deep, it has a lot of support cards to support the gauge and also your life. That's why you have this card. Whee! Oh. Death Ruin Sense has 3 copies on the deck. Sorry for that. And it has 3 copies on the deck. Now, next one is Sun in the Darkness. You may only cast this card if you have a card with Sun Dragon or Black Dragon in its attribute on your field. Now, draw a card. Then if you and your opponent has 8 or more cards in the drop zone, put the top card of your deck into the gauge. You may only cast Sun in Darkness once per turn. So it's an enhancement card also. It's a draw card and a gauge card. So yeah. to support other spell with huge costs, actually. And also the monster, since all of them has gauge costs. Next one will be a set spell, Execution Ground. When a soul goes into a black dragon on your field, put the top card of your deck into your gauge and draw a card. This ability only activates once per turn. When a black dragon set on your field is destroyed by your opponent's card effects, deal 4 damage to your opponent. You may only set 1 Execution Ground on your field. So, maybe y'all are thinking, why is this on the deck? Now, Death Gallows Revival Buddy has a soul. Its cast cost has a soul. For Death Dragon, Death Gaze Dragon Revival Buddy also has a soul. Also, Death Gospel, Death Gaze Reaper also has a soul. So it is a support card technically for all the main monsters on the deck. Now, it's a call cost. Why is it included? It is still included for the ability of Execution Ground. Call cost and other cards that can put into soul are included in the ability of Execution Ground. So, it will proc once you call any dragon or monster that has a call cost of a soul. Okay? So it's also included. It will proc. And also, when this card is also destroyed, okay, it deals 4 damage to your opponent. So your opponent should also be careful with the cards on your field, because this one, if you remember the Dark Mad Knives ability, it's just monster and the item itself, but the set spells are not included in its protection. So the opponents of Death or Deep must be careful in destroying any set spell on the field, because this will hurt. It has 4 damage, bro. So yeah. Next one will be Lifeless Hunting Ground. It's also a set spell. During the battle, that monster on your field attacks your opponent's monster alone. Your opponent cannot counter. When a monster enters your opponent's field by your card effects, put the top card of your deck into your gauge. Deal 1 damage to your opponent. This ability only activates once per turn. So if you remember Death Gospel, Death Gaze Reaper's ability, that it can call monster, or it can call an imaginary monster. I don't know how you will describe that, but it's a face down card with an size 0, 1000 power, 1000 defense, and critical 1. It's a face down monster created by Death Gospel, Death Gaze Reaper, so it will proc this card. And also, during the battle, your opponent cannot counter, literally any counter. Your opponent cannot use any counters during that battle, okay? So that is Lifeless Hunting Ground. It has 2 copies on the deck. This one's also good, you know? Your opponent cannot counter on the attack. That is some serious business in there. Since Buddy Fight is mostly composed of counters, and that one is really good because you cannot counter. So yeah. Next one is Corona's Reverse. You may only cast this card when your opponent casts a spell. Cast cost, pay 2 gauge. Counter, nullify the spell cast by your opponent. Then if your flag is reversed 4 times or more during this fight this turn, your opponent cannot cast spell with the same card name of the nullified spell. Technically, this is a defensive card. Your opponent cannot use, or this spell they will cast will be nullified by Corona's Reverse. So if you don't want your opponent to gain another card, you don't want them to gain life, gain a gauge, or use a defensive spell, Corona's Reverse is a good card for doing that. Next, we have 100 Demon Sorcery Death Sacrifice. Cast, cost, destroy as many monsters on your field as you like. Draw cards equal to the number of monsters destroyed. You may only cast 100 Demon Sorcery Death Sacrifice once per turn. So yeah, it's literally a reset for your field. It's a reset, but also you will gain something from that reset. So if you destroy 3 monsters, that is equivalent to draw 3. Or yeah, it's actually a reset. Okay. Next one. Motherless Predator. You may only cast this card during your opponent's turn if a card with Spectral Strike is on your field. Counter, draw a card. For this turn, all black dragon on your field cannot be rested by your opponent's card effects and get power plus 10,000, and damage your opponent takes by your card effects cannot be reduced. You may only cast Motherless Predator once per turn. This is a really good enhancement card, or an offensive card, because it doesn't only gives a draw, but it also has a power of plus 10,000. And looking at your monster, it's not really the power of the monster of Deep End Dragon is not really that you're gonna be proud of, because it's only have 6,000. So yeah, it gives power plus 10,000. And also, if you remember Spectral Strike, most of them has effect damage to your opponent. So those effect damage cannot be reduced by your opponent. So technically, this is one of the best cards in the deck. It's a very offensive card. If you have that card on your hand, never let it go, especially if it's your turn. It has 3 copies on your field, on the deck. Now, next one is Gate of Darkness Dragon. Set at the beginning of your opponent's main phase. Choose up to size 1 or less monster in your drop zone, and pay 1 gauge. If you do, call the chosen card to your left or right by paying its call cost. You may only use this ability once per turn. When this card is put from the field into the drop zone, deal 1 damage to your opponent. So this is also an offensive set spell. It calls an opponent. It calls a monster to your left or right, and you know how very important death deep monsters are in your field, both on your turn and also your opponent's turn. So it has 1 copy on the deck. Next one. This is also a staple in every Darkness Dragon World deck. Or is it just me? But most of the deck of Darkness Dragon World are Black Dragon, so I think all of the decks we have has Black Ritual already. So yeah, that's Black Ritual, okay? Oh my god, focus. Yeah. The cast cost of this card is destroy a Black Dragon on your field. The ability is put the top card of your deck into your gauge. You gain 1 life and draw 2 cards. You may only cast Black Ritual once per turn. This is a really good enhancement card. You see, you only have to destroy 1 Black Dragon, and then what you get is 2 cards to the gauge, a life, and 2 cards from the deck to your hand. So it's a really amazing support card or enhancement card. Now, we have the next one. The Phantom Geeter. I think it's Geeter. Please correct us on how we pronounce this. Is it Phantom Geeter? But yeah, that's how we read it. Phantom Geeter. So it's a set spell. When your opponent receives damage from Spectral Strike, choose a card on your opponent's hand at random and discard the chosen card. If you do, draw a card. You may only set one Phantom Gator on your field. So once your Spectral Strike dealt damage to your opponent, this card can either make your opponent live or not, because it's not your opponent who's gonna choose to drop a hand card, but it's you. You're literally going to pick the card randomly in his hand, or his or her hand, like any card at random. You may drop a really good card, and you may drop a droppable card. Droppable card. But yeah, this one's really good. Phantom Gator. Now, next one, of course, one of the controversial cards in Buddy Fight. Now, I'm just kidding. It's one of the best defensive cards in Buddy Fight, and it's called Buddy Block. It's a generic card with an attribute of defense or buddy. Its cast cost is pay 1 gauge. Counter, choose and use one of the following two. For this turn, the next damage you take is reduced by 3. And its second ability is if your opponent's card attacked 4 times or more during this turn, for this turn you will not take damage from attacks. Take note, from attacks. This is one of the misconceptions of Buddy Blocks. You know, a lot of people, when you are at the offensive side and your opponent uses a Buddy Block, most of us will stop using cards anymore because it's pointless. But if you read again, it only your opponent will not take damage from attacks. So basically, all damage dealt by card effects can still push through. Okay, can still push through. So if your deck has a lot of effect damage, it can still push through even though he or she used Buddy Block. Okay, so this one's really good. And it can also stop a lot of deck, like a lot. Trust me, a lot. Last spell. Oh my god, finally we're at the last spell. It has so many spells. Yeah, I know. The last one will be Grace of the Sun Deity. Counter, choose and use one of the following two. The first one is for this turn, you cannot take damage by your opponent's card effects. And second, choose a card on your field, and for this turn, the chosen card cannot be destroyed or leave the field, and its soul cannot be dropped or returned to deck by your opponent's card effects. So imagine this card paired with this card. That is the only time you're gonna give up damaging your opponent. Because you cannot take damage from attacks and also cannot take damage from opponent's card effects. So yeah, if your opponent uses both of this at the same time, give up attacking. It's pointless. Unless it has an ability of when this card attacks, so yeah, use that. But when damaging your opponent, yeah, it's pretty much useless. So this is both really a good defensive cards, both Buddy Block and Grace of the Sun Deity. Mostly I use this for you cannot take damage by your opponent's card effects, because most of the decks today has a lot of effect damage already. So this one's a really good defensive item. So yeah, it has 2 copies on the deck. That's all for the spells. Oh my god, yeah, there. So you can take a screenshot or anything, and then just, you know, go back to the cards that you wanted to read again. So that is the spell of Darkness Dragon World, Death or Deep. Now, let's head over to the impact spell, or the impact card. So that's all for the Darkness Dragon World with the Death or Deep attribute. Now, if you want to see the playstyle of this deck, I'll put the link below because we already had a game with this, or using this. So I'll just put the link below. So make sure to like and subscribe and follow us for more Buddy Fight updates. See you at the next gameplay, Buddy Fighters. Bye-bye!